Welcome back to the My Online Schooling podcast, the place where we talk to staff and parents and pupils to find out more about life at the online school. In this episode, we speak to the parent of a pupil at My Online Schooling. Jo Richardson is mother to Alex, aged 14, who ended up at My Online Schooling for, she tells us, several reasons. So we hear about his journey to being a pupil at My Online Schooling and what it was like to be a parent at the same time. Now, like a lot of parents, Jo did have some apprehensions regarding her son starting education online, but she talks about how easily these apprehensions were diminished. But don't let me take away from what she has to say, so come with me as we dial into the home of Alex's mum and speak to Jo Richardson. Jo, thank you for being here and welcome to this episode of the podcast. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Yes, I've been very busy this morning, working from home due to the pandemic. The weather outside is absolutely throwing it down at the moment. But it has been beautiful sunshine for the last few days, so I have been enjoying that.
Yeah, okay, so interesting that it's throwing it down now. That must be good for the garden, though.
It is, and that's really good actually, Simon, because we're in the process of renovating our garden as well. So, all the help that the new plants can get is beneficial. Absolutely.
Okay. Now, Jo, tell me a little bit about your own education, if you could. Where did you go to school and what was your own experience of education like?
Okay, so I went to school in the sort of early to mid 80s. I was educated up in the northwest of the United Kingdom, so I'm actually a Lancastrian by birth. And I went through and did O-levels and CSEs as they were known then, and then on to A-levels. And when I left school, I did have the opportunity to go to university, but I declined because I went straight in to join the Avon and Somerset Police Force. And I was in the police force for quite a number of years before I then left, and I went on to work for the Customs and Excise. And then, following on from that, I then retrained as a teacher. So I've done a whole host of different roles in my life. I retrained as a teacher, and now I own and run my own teaching education business.
Okay, all right. Well, let's just look at those briefly in turn. What was it that took you into the police force in the first case?
If I'm honest, Simon, it was the program Juliet Bravo, because I used to watch that as a child, and I used to love it. I absolutely loved that programme, that series, and it inspired me so much so that I eventually, obviously, as I said, joined the police.
And then moving from there to customs, what was that all about?
So, goodness knows, it was just an opportunity that actually came along at that time, and it was in the days where we did have really quite strict border controls around the ports and airports. And it was just something that interested me, and so I did apply with every intention of probably not getting the job, but actually surprised myself and did get it. And so I worked at various different airports for quite a number of years before I decided to retrain. And the retraining came as a result of me being made redundant.
And the airports, they were in the UK, I guess? Yes,
they were all here in the United Kingdom, yeah.
And then you mentioned about starting your own business. Tell us a little bit about that.
So I was made redundant. As I say, I went on to a retraining programme to become a teacher, and I started actually working in a medical facility. So I was working in a local hospital in the teaching academy there. And it was whilst I was there, I decided just literally one day I had one of those light bulb moments to start an education business, and I set it up with the help of my husband, and I've been doing that now for nearly 10 years, and I've never looked back at all.
And then what side of education is that you're working in?
So I now work in the science, technology, engineering and maths, so STEM. But I teach, my actual day job is to teach space and space science.
Wow, how cool is that? That's fantastic. And what is it about space and space science that interests you so much?
So my whole family is based around space, literally. My husband is an astrophotographer, and between us we are just so inspired by space and astronomy. And it's because of that I went into actually trying to inspire the younger generation in the same way that I was inspired as well. So that's why I got into it.
Well, you mentioned about the younger generation, so it's probably appropriate that we talk about Alex now. Alex is your son. Can you just tell us a little bit about him and sort of, how old he is and why he's studying at My Online Schooling?
So Alex is my 14-year-old teenager. He's one of two. My eldest son, Daniel, has just left university. But Alex ended up at school literally for several reasons. It was a super amazing decision that we did make to send him there. And actually, it's one that I think we should have done a lot earlier. But essentially, Alex went all the way through mainstream school, right from the early years, right up until year 9. He started in the senior school at year 9.
Okay.
And for several years previous to that, he'd had severe issues with bullying. Alex is quite a young 14-year-old. He's quite small. And for that reason, he was literally picked on. And the bullies in sort of year 7 and 8 made his life an absolute misery.
Oh gosh, really?
It was just awful to see and to witness. And Alex, didn't want to go to school as a result of that.
How did that make you feel as a parent?
Oh, just awful. I lost count of the amount of times that I spent either worrying or upset, physically upset about having to put my son through this. Yeah. Trying to sort of work with the school to ease the issue, and it periodically it worked, and the bullies were sort of set aside for a short while, but it would come back. Now here where we are in the UK, that it's a 3-school system, so you go to first school, middle school, and then senior school. And when when Alex left middle school, we had a period where it calmed down. And we were very much more hopeful for the senior school, start. And he started senior school in 2019.
Okay.
Within a few months of starting, unfortunately, the bullying reared its ugly head again. And but this time it was far worse, insofar that we had to get not just the school involved, but the police became involved as well.
Oh gosh! Right.
And so poor Alex, just didn't like school. He hated school.
Understandably so.
Yeah. And so that's, at the time that this was happening, I was unaware of online schools. I didn't, to be honest, in my naivety, I didn't even know they existed. And essentially, we went through sort of the early part of 2020 with this sort of bullying issue overhanging us. And then obviously the pandemic hit and the schools were closed. And that gave Alex respite from the bullying. He was no longer obviously subject to that. But then the pandemic hit, and it became apparent, obviously, as the disruption in schools increased, that obviously Alex's education was suffering because, his start of his GCSE years, and he literally wasn't really doing very much work. And it became a big decision sort of in August, a few months before or a few weeks before they were due to go back in September. It became the decision as to what shall we do? We've got this problem, we've got a dilemma. Don't really want to send him back in the pandemic. I'm worried about that. But I'm also worried about sending him back to the bullies as well. And so we started to look for different ways of doing things. And my husband and I did a lot of research and jointly found out that online schools existed, and as I say, did our research and made a decision late August, sort of early September, to actually withdraw Alex from school and do his schooling in a different way.
And did the school understand why you were pulling him out of that school?
Yes, to be fair to the school, the mainstream school, they were quite supportive actually at the beginning. Insofar that they knew of all the issues that we'd had with him with the bullies, and they knew of the issues that we had surrounding the pandemic, because Alex had ill health in the past as well. So it was very much a case of they were quite supportive, and were of the opinion that Alex would do really well in that sort of environment. So that sort of secured our decision as well.
And what apprehensions did you have regarding the whole concept of online schooling before you started there?
Just the newness of it, to be honest. A new way of doing things. And since he's been at that particular school, it's made me look at sort of a lot of things in a different way. Is there a different way of doing this? Because you're so sort of pigeonholed, aren't you? You go along a track because everybody else does and has done it for decades previous to you. So without having to actually look for that sort of thing, you sort of you just go along with the flow, don't you? And so to look for, my apprehension was it's completely different. Will he do well? Will he get on well? Will he make friends? Is there the ability to make friends? So the sorts of apprehensions that probably most parents would have.
And then comparing that to the actual experience then of Alex joining the school, how did he find it? And how did the concerns that you had beforehand, did any of those rear their head at all?
Not really, no. I have to say, and it's an old cliche, but he literally took to it like a duck out of water. He was literally thrown into this situation where he suddenly had to start learning in a very different way. Insofar that a lot of it is a lot of learning can be independent learning. That's good, but also conversing with the teachers online as opposed to in person, making friends online as opposed to in person. So it's testament to Alex really, that he got on with it so well. So a lot of my apprehension sort of filtered away within the first few months of him, wow, starting.
Yeah, that sounds very good. And what are the differences between online schooling with My Online Schooling compared to when Alex was at school during the lockdown between March and the summer term of 2020?
Oh, huge difference. So in the lockdown during 2020, the sort of blended learning that they were provided with from school was just worksheet after worksheet after worksheet. It wasn't particularly engaging. It wasn't particularly inspiring. And Alex, I'll be honest, he struggled. He got bored. He was bored with just filling in forms because essentially that's all that they were being asked to do, worksheet, in terms of worksheets. With My Online School, it's a whole different scenario. They obviously converse with the teacher online in what can be essentially a normal lesson. So they've got other children in the same room with them, or in the same online room. The teacher is there giving them instruction, talking them through difficult concepts, allowing them to test one another or do assessments, but also do written work and then submit it by scanning it and sending it across. So it's with My Online School, there's that interaction there, and it's not just filling in a worksheet or doing a piece of work all on your own. So there's very much, it's more inclusive. It's more like a classroom setting, just online.
Right. Oh, interesting. Okay. And tell me how Alex finds things now. I mean, here we are recording this in 2021. So, he joined there last year. How does he find it now? If I was to ask him what his own experience is of it, what might he say?
He really enjoys it. He's enjoying the ability to, engage with the teachers. He knows all the teachers now, in terms of their characteristics. So in that way, it's a little bit like mainstream school, so each teacher has their own characteristics.
They do.
He's enjoying it. He really does enjoy it. He likes the fact that he feels like he has more freedom, and he also doesn't have to put up with any bullying. So there's no bullying. He's not got that sort of looming over his head whilst he's trying to do his learning. And
I guess, without wanting to put sort of thoughts in your mind or his mind, but it's not just the fact that there's no bullying, there's also no threat of bullying either. It's not like it's one of those periods when he was at his previous school where it was going okay, because I imagine then there was always the threat that it might come back, and sure enough it did. But here, of course, it's not going to come back.
Yeah, there's no threat at all. All the children that are within his class, and each class doesn't have that many children, they're small classes. One of Alex's first comments was that he couldn't believe how polite and well-mannered all the children were.
Right.
And that was obviously such a difference to what he'd been used to previously. So there's no threat of bullying, there's no actual bullying, there's no disruption, because all of the children are pretty much there for the same reason. They're there to learn and do well in their education.
And is he connecting with other friends from all around the world now as well?
Yeah, that's a huge advantage. He's got friends all over the globe. So there's children from, that are based in Spain or based in somewhere else in Europe. He's got other children in other parts of the UK, in Scotland. So yeah, he's making connections globally, not just being restricted to his local area.
Mm-hmm. And what would you say some of the other benefits are for you all as a family with Alex being at My Online Schooling?
I can give you the one straight thing that we've benefited all from. Two actually. The first one is time.
Okay.
And the second one is less stress. We have much more time together as a family because we're not rushing here, there and everywhere to make sure Alex is at school or, parents' evening and so forth. We have less stress because we don't have the bullying. We don't have the I don't want to go to school in the morning. And it's just such a different household. It's much more peaceful. We always got on before, but we're much more relaxed as a family, much more relaxed.
This is really good to hear, Jo. I've got a couple of quick questions actually now just for you, nothing at all to do with school. The whole world seems to be in a race to inhabit Mars. Do you think this is a good move that we should be making, or is it a futile effort?
It depends who you speak to. So I think in terms of would we be able to live on Mars or move to Mars, at the moment the answer is probably not. There are a lot of issues surrounding humans travelling further and out into space and for longer durations that would mean that it would be incredibly difficult for humans to survive currently and with current technology. However, if you look at that question again, say in the next 30, 40 years, I have a strong feeling that it will probably become a reality because there are plenty of private industry companies out there who are pushing the boundaries for space exploration. So I've got no doubt that at some point in the future that will happen. Whether it will happen imminently is another question entirely.
Okay, right. And a final question, Jo. Is Pluto a planet or not?
I get asked that so many times. I think it should be. No, it isn't. It's a dwarf planet. It's still a planet, but it's a dwarf planet, and it was demoted or deregulated into a dwarf planet in 2006 because some very clever scientists somewhere decided that actually it was too small to be a real planet, and the fact that it orbits around the sun in an area of space with lots of other stuff, lots of other rock and ice. Essentially, it's going around in a group, and because of that, it can't be a planet. Planets are objects that essentially have enough size, enough mass to clear a path around the sun. And so, yeah, Pluto was demoted, as I say, in 2006, and that was one of the reasons why.
Okay, but that's a scientific reason why it may have been demoted. But equally, we do tend to assign personalities to planets, don't we? And is there anything wrong with adopting a planet like Pluto, even if it shouldn't really be within our family in the solar system?
There would be a little bit. I can understand what you're saying. I can hear everybody saying, "Oh, poor Pluto," because as I say, I get that a lot from when I'm teaching. But there is a bit of a problem because there are similar objects in the asteroid belt, which sits between Mars and Jupiter, which are of a similar size and a similar shape. So if Pluto was a proper planet, then that would follow that those items would also have to be proper planets, and it would really mess up when you're teaching the solar system, because there would be a lot more than the planets that are there now. So it would be more difficult to teach it. So yeah, I think it's right that it's a dwarf planet.
Okay, all right, we're happy to leave that there in that case. Jo, we're right at the end of this podcast recording, but I just wanted to say thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your own personal story, but also sharing your feelings about space and Pluto in particular.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure to be a part of it.
So that was Jo Richardson giving us her honest experience of life pre-online school, how it was joining, and also how things are now. Thank you so much, Jo. That was really kind of you to give up your time to share your personal journey and to talk to us about the planets too. If you've heard anything and have any questions at all about online education, then do get in touch with the school. Just search My Online Schooling and you'll find the website. Now, our next episode is coming out soon, but in the meantime, thank you for listening to this one. Don't forget to follow or subscribe so you can stay in touch, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.